there's a thing called the AI chasm. And basically what this is that based on the current data, looking at organizations who are actually implementing AI within organizations, they estimate, and this was a study done last year, they estimate that only about 10% of our AI projects in organizations are actually driving any tangible results for the organization, which means obviously 90% aren't. There's been a shift towards Industry 5.0, which is largely around human-centric design. It's been a realization that actually we can't get rid of all of the humans. And we're seeing organizations that actually did try to replace all of the humans with AI are now having to rehire quite a lot of them for a number of reasons. So we get this focus at the moment on human-machine collaboration, and that's developed into human AI collaboration as a really important part of the process. This problem with the AI chasm, this idea that organizations, whilst they're bringing AI in, are struggling actually to make it make a difference for them. More recently, a couple of years ago, Ferryman produced a paper that's been, and there's a number of other papers that have followed up, showing that actually it's not the technology at the moment that's the blocker in all of this. It's the way that the users, the people within the organizations are thinking, they're behaving and acting, kind of ethics and expertise to be able to use AI to be able to derive real outcomes for organizations. We exhibit overlearned social behaviors such as politeness and reciprocity towards the computers, despite knowing that they lack feelings. We find it really hard to get out of the kind of human habits when we're dealing with AI. We make premature cognitive commitments based on how the computer is labeled. Now, this whole idea about computers as social actors goes beyond AI, but a lot of the more recent research is saying that this PASA, the computers as social actors phenomena, is actually live and well with AI.
In a sense, part of what we're touching on here is this idea of anthropomorphizing, so that we anthropomorphize. And of course, humans, we do this all the time. We anthropomorphize our pets, our objects, we see faces in things. And so we do a lot of this kind of projecting ourselves into others. So the more there is interactivity, the more it increases anthropomorphism.
And there's a thing called the trust index, and it works on a scale of 0 to 1, which is the same scale as probability. And at 0.5, that would mean that we have equal distrust and trust in whatever it happens to be. There's been a whole load of research looking at how we trust AI, how we trust other human beings, and how AI trusts itself. And you'll see all these references at the bottom. We've got a reference list at the end, and we'll send out slides and everything to you after the sessions are finished today. So what these pieces of research are showing is that human to human trust. So if you meet somebody new and you've not met them before and you've got no real kind of experience with them, that our trust index of most other human beings, it lands on the trust index at about 0.675. So we have a tendency more to trust people, but we have in our heads that actually they may be lying skanks. These studies also then found that actually, when we're interacting with AI, our trust index goes up to 0.76. So we're significantly more likely to trust the output of AI than we are other human beings. They then went on to have a look at whether AI trusted itself or not, and they gave the AI a trust index of 0.99, which basically means that whatever it's got within its algorithm, it tends to not believe, but the output, it can only operate on the training and the way the tokens are put together within the AI. And what comes out when we read the output, it looks like AI completely trusts whatever it is that we're doing. And you probably had this experience where you've been working with AI and you've thought, hang on a minute, this isn't right. And you challenge AI and then it turns turtle and it goes, yes, you're right. And then carries on as if it knew all of that all along. And there's a saying, which we'll come back to, there's a saying that AI is amazing if you're talking about something that you've got no domain expertise in, But if you've got domain expertise in the area that it's talking about, you realize that actually it's really limited. We have this strange phenomena where when we are dealing with something in an area that we don't know that much about, we tend to trust what it's doing. And the moment we've got domain expertise, we're going, hang on a minute, that's not quite right. And we have these two things going on at the same time without really thinking about, hang on, if we're doing that in our area of domain expertise, why are we not doing it in the other areas as well?
This touches on a phenomenon known as propensity to trust in automated technology. So what is it that's going on behind this? One is this attribution of integrity, that we also attribute a level of competence. And it's interesting when you start to look at some of the language and the tone that's being used in AI outputs, that you start to notice linguistic clues that move us towards assuming levels of competence and integrity.
And there's a whole series of psychological reasons, and some of those are to do with anthropomorphism and the way that we're interacting with them, but some of them are also to do with the language that AI uses, the language of certainty. And we've done previous sessions, and we've done quite a lot with the membership, looking at the psychological kind of precondition that preconditions us to trust what's going on with AI. This 2006 study found that increased interactivity in media environments, things like video games, AI, and things like that, lead users to view characters as more human-like. That includes AI.
This next research was conducting experiments showing that when people attribute more human-like trait, and by this we mean things like intentions, that we project motives, for example, onto something, emotions, etc., onto, in this case, autonomous vehicles, then when the vehicles display kind of interactive behaviors, so they respond to user input or they make self-initiated decisions, so that increases it. We attribute more human-like traits to them.
Oops. Complete with scientists. This 2017 study found that interactive social robots were more likely to be anthropomorphized than non-interactive ones.
So the next study was examining AI and found that higher interactivity in AI agents results in stronger perceptions of anthropomorphism.
This 2024 study found that when AI systems combine speech and text modalities, which a lot of AI do now, and used first-person pronouns, which most AI chatbots do, users report higher levels of anthropomorphism and perceive the information provided as more accurate, believable.
This last one found that anthropomorphic behaviors often emerge after multiple conversational turns.
This second 2025 study found that if the AI can get us to use social and emotional, so emotional engagement language in our prompts and replies, it increases users' tendencies to anthropomorphize the system itself. And there was a follow-up study that's just been published in this, is that what they've found is that the language that most AI chatbots and generative AI are using tends to move us towards more social, emotional language in the prompt.
So we're talking here about a psychological process. So this is about switching off or temporarily deactivating our own kind of internal moral standards. What is our felt sense of what we want to be doing that feels right or what feels wrong? So all of those things that kind of move us towards having a sense of what we should do here, and that this can be temporarily deactivated. So this allows people to engage in what, from another angle or another perspective, would be seen as unethical behavior without a lot of those associated felt senses, that lump in your chest or the kind of sense of guilt or the internal voice, so that self-censure signals don't crop up. So through this process, we can rationalize and justify actions that actually conflict with our own ethical beliefs.
We've got two examples here. This first one is about an organization that was using AI to scrape and analyze job candidates' social media profiles for cultural fit. So they were going beyond the CV, they were getting the AI to look at the CV. And then what they did was they sent the AI out to do a search and say, tell us more about this person. Are they likely to be a good fit for the organization? What they discovered when they analyzed what the AI had done and the candidates that they ended up shortlisting was that there was a bias against marginalized groups based on race, gender, disability, or social class. And all of those were found within the data. That they filtered out candidates based on proxies like language. So which languages that they were speaking, whether their first language, second language, and things like that. Hobbies or social associations. So that they found, for example, within this data, that the AI was assuming that a cycling hobby, so being a cyclist, implied a good fit and disadvantaged everybody else. And you've got to say, what has being a cyclist got to do with the price of onions, particularly if I'm hiring somebody to be the head of HR? What, why, what's the link here, the causal link? There is none. And then they also found that it was unlawfully using data, such as collecting sensitive data or protected data about religious or political views that were coming up in their posts on social media without any form of informed consent. And the users were not aware that the AI was using this data in order to fulfill the prompt. And the prompt largely was, is this person likely to be a good fit within this team? And then this is the second one. And now we turn to critical disengagement. And these studies here have found that increased use of generative AI, now, as I say, this is not everybody. This is a large subset of individuals. The increased use of generative AI is associated with things like lower levels of academic performance, lower levels of higher order critical thinking skills, the what's called HOTS. And we're talking about things like critical thinking, reflective practice, reflexivity, so thinking about ourselves, our own values and beliefs, analytical thinking, creativity and creative problem solving, our evaluation skills and judgment making, and skills of inquiry and evidence-based practice. And these, as I say, these are what are called HOTS. So increased use of generative AI decreases right across the board all of those sets of skills. We get higher levels of procrastination and increased levels of memory loss as well. So people not remembering stuff that they've been using AI with. There was an interesting study this year that was looking at that particular thing around memory loss and finding out that because we're outsourcing so much to AI, we're not processing it deeply enough. And that's accounting for the memory loss. The studies go on to say that improved critical thinking and higher order thinking skills, the HOTS, tend only to occur where there's systematic and in-depth questioning of the outputs of the AI tool. So what we're talking about here is critical thinking and higher metacognitive capability. So otherwise, critical thinking capability tends to decline with increased use of generative AI tools. And lastly, the uncritical use of generative AI not only reduces critical thinking, but also reduces problem-solving capabilities across the board. We go back to this thing about if we're talking to AI in a domain that we're not expert in, it seems to be right all the time. If we're talking to AI in an area that we've got domain expertise, it's shaky to say the least and simplifies things. And you go, hang on a minute, this isn't quite right. And one of the things that we know about critical thinking, and this is one of the errors that a lot of organizations and educational establishments make, is an awful lot of research around developing critical thinking. And what we know is you cannot develop critical thinking outside of the domain of knowledge that we're developing. The knowledge development and the domain development. So basically what we're talking about is the development of schema, this idea about a framework and a network of thinking, of knowledge. They go together. That we do not develop critical thinking outside of the domain very well. And it's not transferable very well to other domains. So this is why that whatever area that we're working in, whether it's sales, marketing, HR, whatever it happens to be, learning development, operations, that we have somebody who's using the AI with that domain expertise within the organization, because the critical thinking is embedded in there. They also need the critical thinking developed within that, because they may have a lot of domain knowledge, but this is why we've put domain expertise. But whether that's critical or not is another question. And quite often it's not. It's an application of a whole load of knowledge until things go wrong, and experience isn't enough. There's a difference between experience and real domain expertise. And it's needed for that interaction, as it would be if you were talking, for example, to somebody else that was a domain expert. The point about metacognition is quite often it's seen as thinking about thinking, but it's not. It's more than that. It's an awareness of all of our capabilities, awareness of our emotional reactions, for example, awareness of our own values and how they're impacting the way that we're thinking, they're impacting the way that we're behaving and we're making decisions. It's an awareness of our ability to be able to regulate our thinking and our emotions as well.
One of some of the thinking around wisdom also describes a kind of perspectival metacognition as being relevant or involved in wisdom. So this ability to be able to look up and out and at and to project forwards and back and to think about consequences and relationships and interdependencies and unintended consequences. And so to explore through this kind of metacognitive landscape or space, but to do that from multiple different perspectives. But also beyond that, we've got something involved in wisdom, which also touches on things like moral motives. What does it mean to be thinking about a common good? What are our intentions? The involvement of values, drawing on, and these aren't excluded from some of the other areas, for example, domain expertise. And there's an interesting sort of relationship, arguably, between wisdom and expertise, but also drawing on things like understanding of a specific context and being able to draw on tacit knowledge and our intuition, all of which are really relevant and stitched together here when we're thinking about wisdom.
Framework for developing the human side of human AI collaboration. And there's some really some prototype research studies starting to come out now about the impact of doing that, of developing critical thinking within the domain, critical thinking about AI, and then the development of metacognition and the development of wisdom, and in fact, Sarah's developed a wisdom inquiry process. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So one of the things that I've been working on developing is there's three particular components that work together. One is what are a set of practices that when we engage in, increase our capacity to be able to think, act, reason wisely in any one given moment. They prepare us, if you like, for when, the kind of rubber hits the road, when we walk into those really taxing situations, but also increase our capacity to be reasoning wisely as and when needed. But also there's a set of perspectives. So there's a set of ways of thinking which shares some relationship with things like metacognition around things, for example, around emotion downregulation, etc., being able to recognize and sit with uncertainty, recognizing and seeing tensions. But one of the other aspects that I've developed is a wisdom inquiry process. And my research has helped develop this framework, which enables us to follow a series of questions and gives us a framework by which we can explore and address particular problems, challenges, and situations that moves us, that increases the likelihood that we are exploring these different perspectives that are relevant and important for wisdom. So through this wisdom inquiry process, we're picking up on we're picking up on the things that may be really important and central to being able to reason wisely about things, but also we're mitigating some of the challenges that we've been talking about a little earlier. So we're mitigating the likelihood that we might be doing moral outsourcing, for example.
And this is the best generative AI at the moment will hallucinate about 15% of the time. So if you don't have the domain expertise, how do you know which 15% is the problem, which is hallucinated? And that's part of the issue, is they cannot get rid of the hallucinations because of the way generative AI is developed. It's generative. It's like predictive text. It's not getting it accurate all the time. And this is why knowledge of AI is really important. That's the best. Other ones go up to 35, 50% hallucinations. And we just don't know when and where unless you've got that domain expertise. We've developed a 6-session sprint that we're running at the end of October, beginning of September, about thinking with AI. This is largely for organizations. The whole point of the program is to help organizations build cognitive, critical, and ethical capabilities for their employees' need for highly effective, responsible, and sustainable human AI collaboration. It's research-based sprint with the very latest research. We're on it every day. It shows how AI affects our thinking, decision behavior, and how to develop all three of those areas and develop practical strategies for engaging with AI tools productively, wisely, in alignment with organizational needs and values. And it's designed specifically for people in organizations